Welcome to Last Week Pod News. Here are last week's highlights from Chris Williamson's Modern Wisdom podcast.
In this episode, we dive into Mark Rober's insights on engineering a meaningful life, from his thoughts on the future of robotics to his viral crusades against scammers. Mark Rober discusses how internet anonymity removes the repercussions for bad behavior that exist in face-to-face interactions. Chris Williamson introduces the poverty parade concept, noting that passenger violence on airplanes is statistically 9 times higher when economy passengers are forced to walk past first class to reach their seats. They relate this to an evolutionary sense of justice and status hierarchy within a tribe. Mark Rober expresses his preference for augmented reality over virtual reality, citing practical use cases like real-time translation and navigation. Rober argues that robotics is a more promising frontier than VR, especially when specialized factory robots are developed to increase production exponentially. He also touches on the concept of AGI and Dyson spheres, suggesting that robotics is the essential bridge to achieving such massive technological feats. Mark Rober explains the origin of his Glitterbomb series, which began as a way to seek justice after a porch thief stole a package from him. He details the technical process of building bait packages that use GPS tracking and cloud-uploaded footage to catch thieves. Rober also shares the story of infiltrating Indian scam centers with hacker Jim Browning, resulting in a viral investigation that led to the centers being shut down and multiple arrests. Mark Rober describes how the engineering design process, moving from an objective to research, prototyping, and iteration, is highly applicable to solving general life problems. He and Chris discuss the trait of high agency, with Rober identifying Jimmy Kimmel as his go-to person in a crisis due to his loyalty and vast connections. They conclude that storytelling is the most effective way to share a vision and convince others to join a mission. Mark Rober outlines his goal with Crunch Labs to make science and curiosity exciting for children by using his hidden vegetable approach. He emphasizes that earning a student's attention through spectacular entertainment is the necessary first step before any meaningful learning can occur. Rober plans to release a full school curriculum that applies the same high engagement tactics used in his successful YouTube videos. Mark Rober and Chris Williamson reflect on the imbalance in modern life between constant digital inputs and the lack of creative outputs. Rober argues that humans have evolved to work with their hands and that passive consumption of content can lead to a sense of dissatisfaction. He advocates for active creation and tinkering, even if it's just a hobby like watercolor painting, to fulfill a fundamental human need for agency and output. Mark Rober and Chris Williamson discuss the difficulty of traditional mindfulness and the benefits of reaching a flow state during creative work. Rober explains that his best breakthroughs often occur while performing mundane tasks like doing dishes or driving. These activities allow his brain to process complex problems in the background without active focus. Williamson describes his practice of intentionally leaving his phone in the car during short trips to give his mind a break from constant stimulation. Mark advocates for the case for boredom, suggesting that children should be allowed to be bored to spark original creativity. They agree that cutting off digital inputs is essential for deep thinking and problem solving. Rober discusses how humans are increasingly becoming cyborgs as they integrate AI tools like ChatGPT into their daily lives to store and retrieve information. He views these technologies as extensions of the human brain that significantly reduce cognitive friction. Williamson notes a growing aversion to manual problem solving, now that answers are readily available through large language models. Mark explores the possibility of a benevolent overlord scenario where AGI manages global resources to improve human well-being more efficiently. He uses an analogy of pet dogs to illustrate how a more intelligent entity could provide a better life for a less intelligent species. However, both speakers acknowledge the high probability of negative outcomes if AI alignment is not handled with extreme care. Rober and Williamson explore the Great Filter hypothesis and why humanity has yet to encounter alien life in the universe. Mark details NASA's interest in Enceladus, a moon with a subsurface ocean that may harbor simple life forms. They discuss the terrifying possibility that finding life elsewhere could mean that a catastrophic existential filter still awaits humanity in the future. Next up, we dive into the Life Hacks Christmas special, where Johnny and Chris Williamson explore transformative meditation techniques and the fascinating ways our brains predict reality. Johnny discusses the Sam Harris Waking Up app, specifically the Fundamental series. He explains how the theory sessions helped him shift his identity toward being a daily meditator. He uses the analogy of waking up from a dream in a prison cell to describe the experience. Chris Williamson and George explore the concept that human experience is entirely internal. George uses the missing step analogy to show how the brain predicts reality before it happens. Chris adds that sensations like finishing a marathon are generated internally by the mind. George introduces jhana meditation, which focuses on generating intense joy rather than focusing on the breath. Yusuf compares it to a high-fidelity laser beam of focus compared to broader techniques. They discuss how this approach can be a more compelling entry point for some practitioners. Yusuf shares a hack for booking flights using the Uber app. He highlights features like price freezing and the ease of booking compared to standard airline websites. Uber even refunds the difference if the flight price drops after booking. Chris recommends the Flighty app for frequent travelers. It provides real-time updates on gate changes and delays, often providing information faster than airport staff. The app also allows users to track their friends' flight statuses. George suggests using a physical or digital chess clock for deep work sessions. Pausing the clock for every distraction provides an honest look at actual productivity. This method creates an immediate psychological price for succumbing to distractions. Johnny introduces Brick, a physical NFC device used to lock distracting apps on a phone. It creates physical friction by requiring the user to tap the device to unblock their apps. This tool helps break the habit of mindless scrolling by making it more inconvenient. Yusuf discusses the fundamental attribution error, where people judge others' actions by character, but their own by circumstances. He notes that emotional safety often takes precedence over rational truth in arguments. Recognizing this pattern can help in de-escalating conflicts. Chris Williamson extols the virtues of Awala water bottles, specifically the free sip spout that allows for straw sipping and swigging. He argues that the 700 ml size is the optimal balance between capacity and portability. The insulation keeps drinks cold for several hours. Chris presents a meta life hack regarding the adoption of new habits or tools. He suggests waiting 90 days before fully committing to or recommending a new system to ensure its longevity. This prevents the new habit excitement from overshadowing actual utility. George tells the story of Henry Molaison to illustrate how we often forget our own internal thought loops. He uses the metaphor of Henry's mirror to describe the shock of realizing how much time has passed without forming significant new memories. This highlights the importance of presence and conscious awareness. Chris Williamson, George Mack, and Johnny Lawrence discuss the importance of journaling to identify repeating psychological patterns over time. Mack shares the time technique, a mental hack where one analyzes past hardships to gain a detached, higher IQ perspective on current difficulties. Lawrence notes that while achieving goals often feels underwhelming, the traits developed during the process are what truly compound. Mack introduces the Call of Duty versus War concept, warning that people often envy a curated highlight reel rather than the reality of someone's daily struggle. Williamson explores unteachable lessons, noting that certain truths about happiness and success can only be learned through personal experience. The conversation transitions into the philosophy that life is an endless cycle of problem-solving, where every solution naturally unearths a new challenge. Lawrence describes how fatherhood has allowed him to experience the world's beauty through his daughter's eyes, rediscovering novelty in ordinary things. Yusuf Smith adds that this shift from a purely intellectual to a more heart-centered approach provides a profound sense of gratitude and presence. Smith presents the mirror mantra, suggesting that the world only reflects the positivity one brings to it internally. The group discusses the value of holding useful but not true beliefs, and the importance of transitioning from emotional reflection back into decisive action. Chris Williamson and George McGill discuss the psychological traps of working hard solely to feel good about oneself. McGill notes that using feelings of insufficiency to drive work is like using dirty fuel that eventually destroys the engine, suggesting that individuals should instead try to access positive vibes directly. George highlights the curse of competence, where being perceived as a high-functioning individual prevents others from checking in on your well-being. He suggests that the resilience praised in public can often be damaging in private life, especially when it leads to staying in toxic situations or one-sided friendships. Johnny Miller shares a gratitude exercise that involves using AI to describe daily life from 100 years ago to highlight modern comforts like heating and microwaves. He also recommends asking what an 80-year-old version of yourself would appreciate about your current day to gain perspective on what truly matters. Johnny and George discuss how changing specific words can alter emotional reactions to challenges. For instance, framing a decision as an experiment or a problem as a puzzle can reduce anxiety and increase excitement toward finding a solution.
That's everything you need to know from last week's episodes of the Chris Williamson podcast. Let me know in the comments which episode you are starting next. If you found this summary helpful, please like the video and subscribe for more podcast highlights.